The highways of Mexico stretch endlessly through deserts, mountains, and remote villages, roads that seem to go on forever under the blazing sun and the dark cloak of night. They are lifelines for goods and commerce. But at night, when the moon is high and the trucks rumble alone, these highways tell stories that are rarely spoken. Tales of shadows that move too quickly, of passengers who vanish, of roads that seem to fold in on themselves. Stories that the truckers tell in hushed tones, never in front of strangers, because once you hear them, the road itself never lets you forget. Our first story begins with Miguel, a veteran truck driver who had spent over 20 years driving cargo across the northern states. On a late October night, he was hauling a load of electronics from Monterrey to Chihuahua. The road was empty, save for the occasional distant headlights, the tires humming against asphalt that had grown slick from an unexpected drizzle. Miguel had driven these roads 1,000 times, and yet something about that night felt wrong. Around midnight, near a stretch called El Curva del Diablo, Miguel noticed a figure on the side of the road, a woman in white, drenched from the rain, standing perfectly still. He slowed his truck, instinct telling him to be careful. As he passed, the woman raised her arm, as if beckoning him to stop. Miguel, a practical man not easily spooked, shook his head and continued. Moments later, his radio crackled, though no one was transmitting. A voice whispered his name. Miguel. He ignored it, blaming static and tired nerves. But then he noticed something terrifying in his rearview mirror. The woman in white was now sitting in the passenger seat. Miguel's heart raced. He slammed the brakes, the tires screeching, the cargo rattling violently. The seat was empty. Confused and shaken, he glanced at the road ahead, but the white figure stood there again, perfectly still, arms outstretched, blocking the lane. Miguel swerved to avoid her, narrowly missing the edge of a cliff. His pulse thundered as the truck skidded across the slick asphalt, lights flickering. When he finally regained control and looked again, the figure had vanished. Yet he felt it. The presence, cold and persistent, pressing against the cab as if the road itself had shifted. By dawn, Miguel reached a small rest stop, pale and trembling. He told the attendant what had happened. The man nodded solemnly and said, "You've seen La Llorona of the highways. She appears to drivers who travel alone at night. Some never reach the next town." The second story takes place along the desolate highways of Oaxaca. Jorge, another experienced trucker, was transporting agricultural equipment late at night. The road was winding, surrounded by dense forests, shadows pressing close on either side. Jorge's radio flickered constantly, picking up strange interference, sometimes a child's laughter, sometimes cries, always fleeting, impossible to locate. Around 2 a.m., Jorge saw a set of taillights ahead, red and flickering. As he approached, the lights slowed, and the vehicle, an old pickup, was empty. No driver, no passengers. Jorge slowed, confused, and when he passed, the truck disappeared. But moments later, headlights appeared behind him, matching his speed. Every time he tried to pull over, the lights mimicked him, closing in, never allowing him to stop. Sweat ran down Jorge's face as the air in the cab grew heavy. He glanced at the GPS. It spun wildly, showing roads that didn't exist. He took an exit he had never seen, and the road seemed endless, looping back on itself. Then came the whispers, faint at first, growing into distinct words. "Drive. Don't stop. Join us." Jorge's hands gripped the wheel tightly. The headlights were now inside the cab. Impossible. Terrifying. He turned his head. In the passenger seat sat a man, featureless, shadowed, eyes glowing red. Jorge screamed, jerking the wheel. The truck skidded onto the shoulder, and for a heartbeat, the figure vanished. But the whispers didn't stop. They followed him off the road into the night, into his mind. By morning, Jorge parked at a gas station, exhausted, hands shaking. He refused to speak to anyone about what happened, knowing that people would call him crazy, but he never drove that route at night again. and sometimes, when he thinks of the highway, he swears he can hear faint engine hums and the same whispers, calling him back to the shadows. The third story is older, one passed down by many truckers along the Sonora highways. A young driver named Luis had taken on a night run transporting medical supplies. The road was long, straight, and deserted. At one point, he passed a rest area that seemed abandoned. No lights, no sign of life. Out of habit, he stopped to check the load, leaving the truck running. As he inspected the cargo, he heard footsteps approaching. Turning quickly, he saw a man in a dark suit, face obscured by shadows. Luis greeted him, but the man didn't respond. Instead, he pointed toward the road and vanished. Luis froze, then felt a cold breath on his neck, though the air was still and silent. The truck started moving, slowly at first, then accelerating, though Luis hadn't touched the wheel. The headlights illuminated figures standing on the road, dozens of them, dressed in black, faces pale, expressionless. Luis tried to brake, but the pedals wouldn't respond. The shadows whispered in unison, "Drive, drive forever, join the convoy." Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time seemed to stretch unnaturally. When Luis finally arrived at the destination, the rest area was empty. No figures, no signs of the road crew, nothing. Only the memory of being watched, of the cold presence that had guided his truck, leaving him forever unsettled. These stories, though terrifying, are not isolated. Truckers across Mexico speak of shadows moving alongside them on lonely roads, of figures appearing in their vehicles when no one is there, of whispers that invade their minds during long, lonely nights. Some say these are spirits of lost travelers, others victims of ancient curses, and some believe it's the road itself taking those who stray too far into the night. Drivers tell their tales quietly, often over the hum of the tires and the faint glow of dashboard lights. Some never return from certain routes. Others, like Miguel, Jorge, and Luis, live with the memories, carrying the whispers and shadows within them, knowing that highways are not just paths between towns. They are gateways to the unknown, and when night falls, some travelers never truly leave. Night fell heavily over the northern highways, and the silence of the road was broken only by the low rumble of Luis's truck. He had returned from his last encounter weeks ago, thinking the shadows were gone, the whispers silenced. But highways in Mexico are patient, and darkness knows no boundaries. On this particular night, a new route awaited him, one infamous among veteran truckers as the Curva de los Suspiros, a stretch of road where countless travelers had vanished without a trace. Luis's headlights cut through the fog as he approached the bend, tires humming against asphalt that gleamed wet in the moonlight. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the center of the road, a child, pale, drenched in rain, holding a small lantern that flickered with unnatural light. Luis slammed the brakes. The figure vanished instantly, leaving only a chilling silence that pressed against him like ice. The rearview mirror caught something moving, shadows flitting across the cab, impossible angles, elongated forms that seemed to stretch and bend. Luis's pulse raced. The radio crackled with static. Then a voice, distorted and multi-layered, whispered, "Drive, don't stop, join us." Luis tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the road, but the truck seemed to have a will of its own. The wheel tugged subtly, guiding him toward the fog, and his headlights revealed figures. Along the shoulder, men and women, faces pale, eyes hollow, waving silently as if to beckon him into the mist. Each blink of his eyes made the figures closer, larger, more grotesque. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The road twisted and turned in impossible ways. GPS devices spun wildly, showing paths that didn't exist. Each mile marker seemed to reset itself, numbers repeating, blurring reality. Luis realized the truck was no longer moving along a normal road. The highway had become a living entity, reshaping itself to trap him. Meanwhile, other truckers experienced similar phenomena on different highways. Marta, a long-haul driver transporting textiles from Guadalajara to Veracruz, was forced to take a detour through a deserted stretch known for paranormal activity. Around midnight, a heavy fog rolled in, swallowing the road. Her radio picked up voices in Spanish and English, overlapping, urgent, pleading. She slowed her truck, and in the mist she saw shadows dancing across the pavement, humanoid but with elongated limbs and glowing eyes. As she continued, the shadows converged, forming a procession, an army of the lost, traveling alongside her truck. Her lights flickered, and she swore the shadows whispered her name, promising guidance, yet threatening torment. She tried to call for help, but the phones were dead, radios silent, devices useless. Every time she tried to turn, the road looped back, folding reality like paper. Then came the laughter, a high-pitched, childlike sound that echoed endlessly. It surrounded her, penetrating her mind, stealing rational thought. She caught glimpses of the figures inside her cab, passengers who shouldn't exist, sitting silently, eyes void, hands reaching for her, yet fading whenever she looked directly. Marta realized the only way to survive was to keep moving, to obey the highway, but every mile felt like an eternity. Back to Luis, his journey continued through darkness that seemed to breathe. Each turn of the wheel met with whispers that grew louder, more insistent. Then, ahead, a trailer appeared, lights flickering, no driver in sight. He slowed, but the trailer followed him, maintaining perfect distance. Behind it, more trailers emerged, moving in synchronized rhythm, forming a convoy of shadows. The figures on the shoulders joined, floating now, circling the convoy like vultures waiting for prey. Luis's fear was paralyzing. Every instinct screamed to escape, but the highway had become a trap. He passed under a bridge, and the shadows pressed closer, merging into the asphalt, the walls, the truck itself. His cab felt alive, vibrating with energy that was not mechanical. The whispers repeated relentlessly. Drive. Forever. Join the convoy. Hours blurred. He lost track of time, of direction. Each mile was a distorted echo of the last, the night stretching endlessly. Finally, he arrived at a clearing, a rest area, though it appeared abandoned. But in the dim light, he saw dozens of trucks lined up, all empty, all humming with life, as if waiting. Figures moved among them, faceless, their forms flickering between solid and shadow. Luis understood with crushing clarity that this place was a nexus, a convergence of the highway's lost souls. One shadow approached him directly, taller than any human, limbs bending unnaturally. It extended an arm, and in that gesture, Luis saw the fate of the many truckers who had vanished before him. They were not dead, not alive. They existed in a liminal state, trapped between worlds, part of the highway, part of the shadows. Panic propelled him to start the engine and flee, but the vehicle resisted. The shadows converged, whispering in unison, voices layered and impossible. You belong here. Join us. Never leave. Luis gripped the wheel, heart pounding, sweat streaming, vision blurred. He realized that the highway demanded submission, demanded acknowledgement of the unseen, and that survival was a fragile, fleeting act. Marta's journey intersected with Luis's on another highway stretch. She encountered a series of abandoned trucks, cargo spilled on the pavement, but no driver in sight. The shadows, now numerous, surrounded her cab, their whispers a choir of desperation and menace. Every mile felt longer than the last, her headlights revealing the same faceless figures, their eyes empty voids, hands reaching for her as if to drag her into the asphalt itself. She tried to escape into a side road, but it led her back to the highway. The trucks, the shadows, the whispering voices, they were all guides or jailers of the night. She understood that these highways were alive in a way no human could fully comprehend. They remembered, they punished, and they collected those who dared to travel alone. Luis and Marta eventually reached a small town at dawn, exhausted, shaken, yet alive. But the experiences had changed them. Shadows lingered at the edge of vision, whispers followed them in quiet moments, and the highways of Mexico would never again seem safe. Every night, they dreamt of the faceless figures, of trailers moving without drivers, of roads that twisted endlessly, as if the very earth sought to claim them. Veteran truckers say the highways hold memories of travelers lost, of accidents unexplained, of whispers carried on the wind. Those who ignore the warnings, who drive alone at night, may encounter the shadows. Some return, haunted forever. Some vanish, leaving nothing but a rumble of tires and the faint, lingering echo of voices in the darkness. New truckers are warned in hushed tones. Never stop for strangers at night. Never follow lights that appear too suddenly. Never listen to whispers. But those who have traveled the highways know it is not always possible to resist, because the highways of Mexico are alive, patient, and hungry, and the shadows that walk them are eternal. As the night deepened, Luis's truck seemed to take on a life of its own. The hum of the engine merged with the whispers, a symphony of mechanical and supernatural sound. Shadows crept along the sides of the cab, twisting into shapes that resembled people he had known. Friends, family, even colleagues, but all distorted, faceless, their mouths moving in silent screams. Every blink of his eyes brought a new horror, each one more unnerving than the last. Ahead, the headlights revealed an abandoned gas station. Normally, it would be a safe stop, but tonight, it radiated an unnatural aura. The pumps were moving slightly, as if breathing, and the air smelled faintly of blood and oil. A figure appeared inside the small convenience store, waving at him, but the glass reflected only darkness. Luis's instincts screamed to drive past, but curiosity and fear intertwined, rooting him to the spot. Suddenly, the rearview mirror shimmered. Inside the cab, the seats were filled with shadowy figures, some with elongated limbs, others entirely featureless. They didn't move at first, only stared, and Luis felt their gaze piercing through him, pulling at his thoughts, invading his mind. A cold hand seemed to brush against his shoulder, yet when he turned, no one was there. Panic surged, but the truck remained on autopilot, guiding him deeper into the unknown stretch of highway. Marta, miles away, encountered a similar phenomenon. She saw a convoy of trucks, all identical, moving in silence, each one carrying invisible cargo, their headlights revealing glimpses of figures who seemed to exist only between dimensions. She tried to pass them, but each attempt made the road loop back, leading her once again into the procession. The whispers, now louder and more insistent, repeated her name over and over, blending into a chorus of despair. Meanwhile, the night sky grew darker, clouds swirling unnaturally above the highway. Thunder rumbled in the distance, though no storm had been predicted. Lightning illuminated the shadows in stark detail, revealing distorted faces pressed against trees, overpasses, and the asphalt itself. Luis's truck horn blared uncontrollably, echoing down the endless road, yet the shadows did not flinch. Instead, they seemed to dance, moving rhythmically to the eerie sound, guiding him toward the heart of the night's terror. The road twisted violently, bending as though the earth itself was alive. Signs appeared and disappeared, mile markers counted backward, and exits led to nowhere. The trucks ahead, both real and spectral, followed a route dictated by forces beyond comprehension. The shadows whispered commands, promises of power, threats of eternal wandering, each one laced with an irresistible pull. In one horrifying moment, Luis glimpsed a figure in the middle of the highway. A young child, crying silently, eyes black voids, hands reaching out as if begging him to stop. As he swerved violently to avoid it, the child vanished, leaving only a damp imprint on the asphalt. Luis's heart pounded. He realized the figures could manipulate reality itself. The highway was no longer a path but a labyrinth designed to trap, to consume, to turn drivers into permanent residents of its nightmarish domain. Hours, or maybe moments, later, both Luis and Marta found themselves approaching a bridge that spanned an endless chasm of fog. Beneath, shadowy figures floated, their forms indistinct but menacing, whispering their names. Every mile felt infinite, every turn a trap. They knew escape was possible only by submission, by moving with the highway's rhythm, obeying its dark will. Finally, as dawn approached, both trucks reached isolated towns, their drivers shaken but alive. Yet the experiences left indelible marks. Shadows lingered in peripheral vision, whispers echoed in quiet rooms, and every highway trip carried the memory of the night's horrors. Luis and Marta understood that survival was temporary. The highways would always call, always remember, always wait. Truckers across Mexico share these stories only in whispers, in truck stops far from the roads themselves. They speak of faceless figures, endless convoys, and highways that bend reality. Some dismiss them as legend, others as hallucinations from long nights alone on asphalt. But those who have driven the roads at night know better. The highways are alive, and when darkness falls, they are hungry. The sun had barely risen over the horizon, casting pale light on the Mexican highways, yet the darkness from the night refused to vanish. Luis and Marta, both haunted by their previous encounters, knew instinctively that the highways did not forget, and they did not forgive. The shadows they had encountered, the whispers that had invaded their minds, were not bound by night. They lingered, patient, waiting for the next driver to fall into the trap. Luis found himself drawn back to the Curva de los Suspiros, despite every instinct screaming to avoid it. He couldn't explain the pull, only that it felt like the road itself had claimed a piece of him. The highway stretched endlessly, more alive than ever. Each turn seemed to anticipate his movements, guiding him toward the waiting shadows. The air grew cold, thick with the scent of rust and decay, and the hum of his engine mingled with distant, unintelligible whispers. Suddenly, a convoy appeared in the distance. Not ordinary trucks, but spectral forms, headlights flickering in a rhythm that seemed unnatural, almost deliberate. Luis's heart raced. He tried to swerve, to escape, but the road twisted violently beneath him, bending like liquid asphalt. The shadows appeared along the shoulder, dozens of faceless figures, some hovering, some walking, all staring with hollow eyes that seemed to pierce through his very soul. One figure stepped onto the road. It was tall, impossibly elongated, its limbs bending in unnatural angles. It extended a hand, and Luis felt a chill crawl over his spine. In that moment, he realized the full truth. The highway itself was alive, a predator hunting those who dared to traverse it alone. The trucks in the convoy followed his movements perfectly, closing in, surrounding him, guiding him deeper into the nightmare. Marta, driving along a parallel route miles away, encountered her own horror. A series of abandoned trucks appeared, identical, lined up as if waiting for her. Shadows floated across the road, whispering her name in voices layered with despair and menace. Her lights revealed glimpses of figures in the cabs, drivers from long ago, faces twisted, eyes empty, eternally trapped. She tried to turn onto a side road, but it folded back, looping her into the convoy once more. Back on the main highway, Luis's truck trembled. The shadows entered the cab, some sitting silently, others stretching impossibly across the seats. Their whispers formed a chorus, an unending mantra. Drive. Join us. Never leave. Panic surged through him, but the truck seemed to resist, moving with a will beyond his control. The asphalt beneath him pulsed, the road bending and shifting, forming paths that should not exist. Suddenly, Luis glimpsed a figure in the distance, a child holding a lantern, pale and soaked, just like the figure he had seen weeks before. As he approached, the child vanished, leaving only a wet imprint on the pavement. Then came the laughter, high-pitched, eerie, surrounding him completely. It wasn't coming from a single source. It was everywhere, inside the cab, outside, inside his mind. He understood then. The highways collected memories, fears, and souls. The faceless figures were not merely ghosts. They were remnants of the road itself, creatures born from the lost travelers, feeding on fear, guiding the living into their eternal domain. Luis gripped the wheel, heart pounding, eyes darting, trying desperately to navigate the shifting asphalt. Every mile felt infinite, every curve an impossible trap. Marta, trapped in her own spectral convoy, realized she had no choice but to follow the rhythm of the road. The shadows pressed closer, whispering, guiding, tempting her. One misstep could mean joining the ranks of the lost. She drove, obeying the highway, every nerve screaming, every thought screaming, yet unable to resist. The sun rose higher, but the fog remained, dense and suffocating. Both trucks, miles apart, seemed to move through parallel realities. Luis's cab trembled as the faceless figures multiplied, merging with the asphalt, the surrounding air, the very essence of the highway. The whispers became unbearable, drilling into his mind, yet he fought to remain conscious, to remain alive. At last he saw a faint glimmer of light, a break in the fog. Summoning every ounce of strength, he accelerated, feeling the shadows claw at him, reaching, whispering, screaming. The highway pulsed beneath him, resisting, but he broke through the mist, emerging onto a familiar stretch of road bathed in sunlight. The shadows vanished instantly, leaving only the echo of whispers lingering in his ears. Marta followed a similar path, emerging into sunlight, heart racing, hands trembling. The convoys, the faceless figures, the whispers. They faded, yet their presence lingered in memory, in shadowed corners, in every stretch of highway she would travel thereafter. Both drivers understood a harsh truth. Survival was temporary. The highways remembered. The shadows waited. And when night fell again, they would return, patient and hungry, ready to claim the next soul brave or foolish enough to traverse the roads alone. Even now, long after their encounters, Luis and Marta feel the pull of the highways. A shadow flickers at the edge of vision. A whisper drifts through the air. And every time they hear the rumble of tires in the distance, they remember, some roads never truly end, and some travelers never truly escape. Because the highways of Mexico are more than asphalt and lines. They are alive, they are eternal, and they hunger.